Eliza Mercer struck the match and held her father's last letter over the flame. The paper curled, blackened, and died in her fingers. Behind her, strangers carried her mother's piano out the front door. She didn't turn around. She was done watching her life disappear piece by piece. Tomorrow, she'd board a train to Montana, to marry a man she'd never met, a man who didn't want her love, just her honesty. Stay with me until the end of this story. Subscribe and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey has traveled. The auctioneer called out Lot 19, and Eliza Mercer kept walking. She didn't look back at the house, didn't watch the men haul her mother's rocking chair down the porch steps, didn't flinch when someone laughed about the water stain on her father's medical bag, the one he'd carried for 22 years, the one that still smelled like iodine and whiskey. She kept walking because if she stopped, she'd scream. And Eliza Mercer had made a decision 3 days ago that she was done screaming. The letter was already ash. She'd burned it that morning in the kitchen sink, the last thing Dr. Henry Mercer ever wrote. 4 words. Forgive me. I'm sorry. He'd left it on his desk, next to the empty laudanum bottle, next to the half-finished patient chart for Mrs. Coleman, the woman he'd operated on drunk, the woman who'd bled out on his table, the woman whose husband now owned everything the Mercers had ever touched. Eliza reached the end of Chestnut Street and stopped. Philadelphia stretched behind her, familiar and foreign. She'd been born here, learned to read here, watched her mother die of consumption in the upstairs bedroom, watched her father pour his grief into a bottle and his reputation into the gutter. And now she was leaving. Miss Mercer. She turned. Mr. Aldridge, her father's attorney, stood on the corner, hat in hand, looking like a man delivering a coffin. The final accounting, he said, holding out an envelope. After the auction and the settlement with the Coleman estate, you'll have $11 remaining. 11? I'm sorry. Your father's debts were extensive. The malpractice judgment alone, I know what the judgment was, Mr. Aldridge. He shifted his weight. Have you considered the options I mentioned? Mrs. Hargrove is still looking for a governess. The pay is modest, but Mrs. Hargrove withdrew her offer. Apparently, she can't have the daughter of a... Eliza stopped, swallowed. She can't have me near her children. Aldridge had the decency to look away. I see. So did Mrs. Whitman, and the Drexel household, and the school board. Eliza took the envelope. It seems my father's reputation is the one thing I actually inherited. Miss Mercer, if there's anything I can... There isn't. But thank you. She walked away before he could offer more sympathy. Sympathy was just guilt wearing a polite hat, and Eliza had no use for either. Back at Ruth's boarding house, her cousin Ruth, the only family she had left, Eliza climbed the stairs to the small room she'd been given and sat on the bed. $11, 3 dresses, 1 trunk, her mother's Bible, a box of surgical instruments her father had taught her to use before the drinking got bad. That was everything. That was her entire life, packed and labeled and worth less than the piano they'd just carried out her front door. Ruth knocked. Didn't wait for an answer. She never did. Eat something. Ruth set a plate of bread and cheese on the dresser. She was 40, broad-shouldered, with hands rough from years of running a boarding house alone after her husband died in the mines. You look like death warmed over. Flattering. I'm not here to flatter you. I'm here to keep you alive long enough to make a decision. Ruth sat in the chair by the window. Did you read it? The other letter. The one Ruth had given her 2 weeks ago. The one Eliza had read 14 times and pretended she'd read once. I read it. And? And it's insane, Ruth. You know that. I know a man in Copper Bend, Montana is looking for a wife. I know he's willing to pay your travel and give you $200 on arrival. No strings. I know he lost his first wife. Not to death, to leaving. And he's not looking for romance. He's looking for a partner. Ruth leaned forward. I also know you have $11 and no prospects. So maybe insane is relative. Eliza picked up the bread, put it down. What kind of man advertises for a wife? The honest kind. The kind who knows what he wants and says it plain instead of dressing it up in courtship and pretending. You've met him? Once, when I visited Copper Bend 2 years ago. His name is Emmett Calloway. He's got a big ranch, good land, and a face that looks like God started carving it and got distracted halfway through. Ruth paused. He's also got something wrong in his head. From the war. Eliza looked up sharply. What do you mean? Nightmares. Bad ones. Hank, that's his ranch hand, told me Emmett wakes up screaming some nights. Hasn't been right since Shiloh. His wife Clara couldn't handle it. Left him 2 years in. And you think I should marry this man? I think you should meet him. There's a difference. Ruth stood. Eliza, I love you. You're the smartest woman I know. But smart doesn't pay rent, and pride doesn't fill a stomach. You've got 1 week before the boarding house is full, and I need this room. I'm not throwing you out. I'm telling you the truth because someone has to. The truth. The truth is that Philadelphia is done with you. Your father saw to that. The truth is that every door in this city has your name on a list, and it's not the good kind. The truth is, Ruth's voice softened. The truth is, you deserve better than what this city is willing to give you. Maybe Montana is better. Maybe it's worse. But at least it's a choice. Eliza sat with that word after Ruth left. Choice. What a luxury. What a lie. When your options were a stranger's proposal or the street, calling it a choice was like calling drowning a swim. But Ruth was right about one thing. Philadelphia was done with her. She pulled out the letter again. Not her father's, the other one. Ruth's careful handwriting relaying the terms Emmett Calloway had laid out through a mutual acquaintance. He's offering marriage, not servitude. He'll provide a home, an allowance, and full respect. He asks for honesty and willingness to work alongside him. He will not demand anything you're not prepared to give. He'll fund your return east if you find the arrangement unbearable. He asks only that you come with open eyes. Open eyes. Eliza almost laughed. Her eyes had been open since she was 16 and found her father passed out in his office with a patient bleeding on the table. Her eyes had been open when she'd stitched that patient up herself because no one else was there. Her eyes had been open when she'd watched her father's hands shake worse every year, when she'd covered for him, lied for him, enabled him. Her eyes were wide open. That was the problem. She went to the telegraph office the next morning. The clerk, a pimply young man who clearly recognized her name, took her message without meeting her eyes. Arriving Copper Bend, June 14th. Stop. Eliza Mercer. Stop. 23 words, including the address. 40 cents. 3% of everything she owned in the world spent on 6 seconds of Morse code that would change her life. The train left Philadelphia on a Tuesday. Eliza carried her trunk to the station herself. Ruth came to see her off, pressing a package of food into her hands and a $20 bill. Eliza tried to refuse. Take it, Ruth said firmly. Call it a loan if your pride needs that. Pay me back when you're a rich rancher's wife. If. When. Ruth grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. You are not your father. What he did, what he became, that's not you. You hear me? You are not his sins." Eliza's throat closed. She nodded because speaking would have broken something she couldn't afford to break. Not here. Not yet. "Write me," Ruth said, "every week. And if that man hurts you, if he so much as raises his voice wrong, you wire me and I'll come get you myself." "You're in Philadelphia. He's in Montana." "I don't care if he's on the moon. You're my family." Ruth hugged her, hard and brief. "Now get on that train before I change my mind and lock you in the attic." The train pulled out, and Philadelphia slid away like a bad dream releasing its grip. Eliza didn't cry. She'd done her crime. 3 weeks of it after her father died. Crying for him, for herself, for the life that had crumbled so fast she hadn't even felt it going. Then she'd stopped. The way you stop bleeding eventually. Not because you're healed, but because there's nothing left to lose. The journey west took 6 days. Philadelphia to Chicago, Chicago to Omaha, Omaha to Butte, Butte to Copper Bend by stagecoach. The last 40 miles of rough road and rougher company. In Chicago, she shared a bench with a woman named Ada, who was traveling to meet her sister in Nebraska. Ada was 60, silver-haired, and had opinions about everything. "Montana," Ada said when Eliza told her. "What's in Montana?" "A husband." "You don't sound too sure about that." "I'm not sure about anything. That's sort of the point." Ada studied her. "You're running from something." "Everyone on a westbound train is running from something." "True enough." Ada unwrapped a sandwich, offered half. "My husband died 6 years ago. I ran all the way to my sister's spare bedroom. Worst decision I ever made." She chewed thoughtfully. "Best one, too. Sometimes you don't know which it is until you're already there." On the train to Butte, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow berth, listening to the wheels and thinking about Emmett Calloway. Ruth's description played on repeat. Big ranch. Good land. Face like God started carving and got distracted. Something wrong in his head from the war. She knew about men with something wrong in their heads. She'd lived with one for 25 years. Her father's wrong had been the bottle. Emmett's was the battlefield. Was there a difference? Was she walking into the same trap with a different name? Maybe. Probably. But the alternative was $11 and a city that had already erased her. The stagecoach to Copper Bend was 14 hours of dust, heat, and a man named Virgil who drove like the horses owed him money. 4 passengers crammed inside. Eliza, a preacher heading to a new congregation, a hardware salesman with a sample case, and the young ranch hand returning from Butte with a black eye and a hangover. "Copper Bend," Virgil announced when they stopped to water the horses. "You the Calloway woman?" "I'm Eliza Mercer." "Same thing, way I hear it." He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Emmett's a good sort. Keeps to himself. Pays his bills. Doesn't cause trouble." Virgil loaded her trunk. "His last wife caused plenty, though. Clara Calloway had a mouth on her that could strip paint. Folks weren't sorry to see her go." "I'm not Clara." "No, ma'am, I reckon you're not." He looked at her for a long moment. "You got doctor's hands." Eliza glanced down at her fingers. Long, steady, precise. Her father's hands. "My father was a physician." "Was?" "He's dead." "Sorry to hear it." Virgil climbed up to the driver's seat. "Copper Bend could use a doctor. Old Doc Pruitt's 73 and half blind. Last month he set a broken arm backwards. Man had to ride to Butte to get it fixed." Eliza said nothing. She climbed into the coach, closed the door, and stared out the window at a landscape so vast it made her chest ache. They reached Copper Bend at dusk. The town materialized out of the prairie like something half-remembered. One main street, a general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple. Buildings that looked temporary, like the wind might rearrange them overnight. Virgil pulled up in front of the general store and helped her down. "Your cousin's place is that way," he pointed north. "Blue door. Can't miss it." "Calloway knows you're coming," Ruth wired ahead. Eliza stood in the street with her trunk at her feet and the last light dying on the mountains and thought, "This is either the bravest thing I've ever done or the stupidest." She picked up her trunk and started walking. Ruth's friend Margaret, an older woman who'd agreed to host Eliza before the wedding, met her at the blue door with flour on her hands and warmth in her eyes. "Lord, child, you look half dead. Come in, sit down, eat." Eliza ate, slept, woke in a strange bed in a strange town, and lay still for 10 minutes, trying to remember why she was here. Then it came back. All of it. The auction, the ashes, the train, the man she'd agreed to marry. Margaret knocked at 7. "He's coming at 10. Emmett. He wanted to give you time to rest." "That's considerate." "He's a considerate man. Terrible at showing it sometimes, but it's in there." Margaret set coffee on the dresser. "Eliza, I want to tell you something before you meet him." "All right." "He's going to seem cold, hard, like he doesn't care. But that's not what's happening. He cares so much it scares him, so he locks it down. You understand? He's not mean. He's afraid." "Afraid of what?" Margaret looked at her steadily. "Of being left again." At 10 o'clock, Eliza heard hoofbeats in the street. She stood at the window and watched a man dismount from a tall gray horse. He was big, over 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, moving with the careful economy of someone who'd learned that wasted motion cost energy he couldn't spare. Dark hair, more silver than black, cut short. A jaw that looked like it had been set wrong and healed hard. He wore no gun that she could see, just work clothes, clean but not fancy, and a hat he removed before he reached the door. He knocked twice, firm, not loud. Margaret opened the door. "Emmett, come in." He stepped inside, and his eyes found Eliza immediately. Blue, pale blue, like creek water over stone. And in them, something she recognized with a shock that went through her like voltage. Fear. The same fear she'd seen in her own mirror every morning for the past 3 months. "Miss Mercer." His voice was low, rough, like he didn't use it often enough to keep it smooth. "Mr. Calloway." They stood there, 2 damaged people in a stranger's parlor, taking measure of each other across 6 feet of floor that felt like 600 miles. Margaret cleared her throat. "I'll be in the kitchen." She left. The silence she left behind was enormous. Emmett gestured to a chair. "Please." They sat. He put his hat on his knee. She noticed his hands, scarred, thick-knuckled, a tremor in the left one that he stilled by pressing it flat against his thigh. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At what?" "Talking. Explaining myself. Clara used to say I had all the warmth of a fence post." Something flickered in his expression. She wasn't wrong. "I didn't come here for warmth, Mr. Calloway. I came here because I'm out of options. I think honesty serves us better than pretending." He looked at her. Really looked. And something shifted in those pale eyes. Not warmth exactly. Recognition. "All right," he said. "Honest then. I'm 36. I own 3,000 acres and 400 head of cattle. I have a house, a good one. I don't drink. I don't gamble. I work hard, and I expect the same from anyone beside me." He paused. The tremor in his left hand returned. He pressed it down again. I was married before. Clara left because because the war did something to my head, and I couldn't fix it. Nightmares. Bad ones. Sometimes I wake up and I don't know where I am. Sometimes I break things. He said this flatly, like reading a list of defects on a bill of sale. I've never hurt anyone, but I've scared people. I scared Clara enough that she took a stage to Denver and didn't come back. I appreciate you telling me that. You need to know what you're getting into. I won't lie about it. Not to you, not to anyone. He reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope. This is $200 and a return ticket to Philadelphia. It's yours, right now, whether you marry me or not, whether you stay an hour or a year. You take this and you keep it. Eliza stared at the envelope. Why? Because I won't trap you. Because you should always have a way out. And because... He stopped. Started again. Because Clara didn't have that. And I think that's part of why she hated me by the end. She felt stuck. I won't do that to another woman. Eliza took the envelope. Her hands were steady. His weren't. Now you, he said. Your turn for honest. She set the envelope in her lap, looked him in the eye. My father was a doctor, a good one once. Then he started drinking. He operated on a woman while he was drunk, and she died on his table. Her husband sued, took everything. My father killed himself 3 months ago, left me with his debts and his reputation, which in Philadelphia is worse than having nothing at all. She didn't blink. I applied for 11 positions. Governess, teacher, seamstress. Every one rejected me. The daughter of a man who killed a patient through negligence isn't someone people want in their homes. I have $11, 1 trunk, and a cousin who loves me but can't keep me. I'm marrying you because the alternative is the street. That's my honest, Mr. Calloway. Silence. Then Emmett nodded, slow, like he was fitting her words into a space he'd already prepared. Fair enough, he said. We're both here because we ran out of better choices. That's not romantic, but it's real. I don't need romance. Good. I don't have any to offer. He stood, walked to the window, turned back. One more thing. I know about your father's medical practice. Ruth mentioned you assisted him, that you've got skill with a needle and medicine. Eliza tensed. I'm not a doctor. I'm not asking you to be, but out here, the nearest real doctor is 40 miles away. People get hurt. Animals get hurt. If you've got knowledge that could help, I'd be a fool to pretend you don't. He paused. I won't ask you to be something you don't want to be, but I won't ask you to hide what you are either. Something cracked open in Eliza's chest. Small, hairline, barely noticeable, but there. Tomorrow morning, she said. The courthouse, 9 o'clock. He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, and shaking slightly. Tomorrow morning, he said. He picked up his hat, settled it on his head, and walked out. Eliza watched him mount the gray horse and ride away, straight-backed, alone, heading toward a ranch she'd never seen, and a life she couldn't imagine. She looked down at the envelope in her lap. $200 and a ticket home. Escape. Freedom. The thing she'd traveled 2,000 miles to find, offered before she'd even said, I do. She pressed the envelope to her chest and breathed. Tomorrow she'd marry a stranger with broken hands and terrified eyes, who'd given her the one thing no one else had. A choice. The courthouse smelled like old paper and tobacco smoke. Eliza stood outside the door in her only good dress. Dark green wool, too heavy for June, sweat already gathering at the back of her neck. Margaret had pinned her hair up that morning with hands that shook from arthritis, and Eliza hadn't told her it was crooked because the old woman had been crying, and kindness seemed more important than vanity. 9 o'clock. Emmett had said 9 o'clock. It was 8:52. She knew because she'd checked the clock in the general store window 3 times on the walk over. Margaret walked beside her, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd cut from her garden without asking if Eliza wanted them. Eliza hadn't wanted them. She took them anyway. "You're shaking," Margaret said. "I'm not." "Honey, I can hear your teeth." Eliza clenched her jaw. "It's cold." "It's June." "Then I'm cold in June." Margaret squeezed her arm and said nothing else, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for Eliza in months. At 8:57, hoofbeats. Eliza turned and watched Emmett ride up on the gray horse, dismount in one motion, and tie the reins to the post. He was wearing a dark suit, clean and pressed, but not new. White shirt, no tie. He'd shaved, and she could see a small cut on his jaw where the razor had slipped. He was nervous. The realization hit her like a slap. This man, this big, scarred, war-broken man who owned 3,000 acres and 400 cattle, was nervous about marrying her. He walked toward them, hat in hand. "Miss Mercer." "Mr. Calloway." "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" Something moved behind his eyes. "Crossed my mind." "Well, here I am." "Here you are." He looked at her for a long moment, then at the wildflowers in her hand, then back at her face. "You look nice." "Thank you. So do you." "You cut yourself shaving." His hand went to his jaw. "Razor's dull." "I can sharpen it. I used to sharpen my father's surgical instruments." The words came out before she could stop them, and she watched his expression for the flinch, the recoil, the shadow that always crossed people's faces when she mentioned her father. But Emmett just nodded. "I'd appreciate that." Margaret ushered them inside and up the stairs to Judge Farley's office. The judge was a small man with enormous white eyebrows and ink stains on his fingers. He looked at them over half-moon spectacles and said, "Calloway, this the bride?" "Yes, sir." "She know what she's getting into?" Eliza stepped forward. "She's standing right here, Judge, and yes, she does." Farley's eyebrows climbed. He looked at Emmett. "Got yourself a live one?" "Yes, sir, I believe I do." The ceremony took 4 minutes. Judge Farley read the vows from a book so worn the binding was held together with twine. Eliza said, "I do," and her voice didn't crack. Emmett said, "I do," and his did, just barely, just enough that she heard it. He produced 2 gold bands from his coat pocket. Simple, thin, unadorned. He slid one onto her finger. His hands were trembling. She slid the other onto his, and when her fingers touched his palm, she felt the calluses and the scars and the faint, persistent tremor that he couldn't control. "Kiss your bride," Farley said. Emmett leaned down, slow, careful, giving her time. His lips brushed hers, brief, dry, respectful. A handshake of a kiss. "Congratulations," Farley said. "Try not to kill each other." Margaret cried. Eliza signed the certificate in handwriting that didn't look like hers. Eliza Catherine Calloway. A stranger's name in her own hand. Outside, Emmett helped her onto the wagon seat. His hands at her waist were firm and impersonal, like he was lifting a feed sack. She told herself not to read into it. They'd known each other less than 20 hours. Margaret waved from the courthouse steps. "You write to me, Eliza Calloway. Every week." "I will." "And you," Margaret pointed at Emmett, You be good to her." "Yes, ma'am." He clicked his tongue, and the horses moved. The wagon rattled down Main Street, past the saloon where two men stopped talking to stare, past the general store where a woman in the doorway whispered to her companion, past the church with its crooked steeple. Eliza felt every pair of eyes like a thumbprint on her skin. "They're staring," she said. "They'll stop. Give it a week." "What are they saying?" "That Emmett Calloway went and got himself a mail-order bride after the last one ran off." He said it flat, no emotion. "That's what they said about Clara, too. Didn't bother her until it did." "I'm not Clara." "No, you're not." They rode in silence for a mile. 2 miles. The town disappeared behind them, and the road stretched ahead, rutted and dusty, cutting through grassland that went on forever. Eliza gripped the seat with both hands as the wagon bounced over a particularly vicious rut. "Road gets better past the creek," Emmett said. "Define better." "Less likely to knock your teeth out, more likely to just rattle your spine." She looked at him. Was that a joke? His face gave nothing away. "How far is the ranch?" she asked. "Hour and a half, maybe 2 with a wagon loaded." "And what should I expect when we get there?" He considered this, longer than seemed necessary. "A house, 2 stories, solid. Kitchen's good, stove works. Pump in the yard. There's a barn, bunkhouse, corrals. I've got 2 hands, Hank Jessup and a kid named Charlie Polk. They live in the bunkhouse, usually eat with me." "Is that all right? Them eating with us?" "Your house now, too. Your call." "It's fine. I'll cook for everyone." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to contribute something on day 1. Cooking I can do." He glanced at her, quick, assessing. "All right." More silence. Eliza searched for something to say, some bridge across the canyon of strangeness between them. "Tell me about Hank." Emmett's expression shifted. "Not much, but enough." "Hank Jessup's been with me 6 years, best man I know. Came west after the war. Former slave, freed by the proclamation, fought with the colored troops at Petersburg. He doesn't talk about it much. Neither do I. We understand each other." "And Charlie?" "Charlie's 19. Showed up 2 years ago, half-starved, looking for work. Good with horses, bad with money. Talks enough for 3 people." "Sounds like he'll balance you out." This time she was sure she saw something at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, the ghost of one. "One more thing," Emmett said, and his voice changed, dropped lower, got careful. "I told you about the nightmares." "Yes?" "They're bad, Eliza. I need you to understand what that means. It means some nights I wake up yelling. Sometimes I don't know where I am. Sometimes I—" He stopped. The tremor in his left hand was visible on the reins. "Sometimes I throw things, break things. I've never hurt anyone, but I've put my fist through a wall more than once." "What should I do when it happens?" He looked at her, surprised. "What?" "When it happens, what do you need me to do? Stay away? Talk to you? Get Hank?" "Most people would ask if they should be afraid." "I grew up with a man who lost control regularly, Mr. Calloway. I'm not asking if I should be afraid. I'm asking how to help." The silence that followed was different from the others. Heavier, full of something neither of them was ready to name. "Don't touch me," he said finally. "When it's happening, don't touch me. Talk if you want, say my name, but don't come close until I know where I am. And if I tell you to get out, you get out. No questions." "All right." "You're not scared?" "I'm terrified, but not of you." She looked at her hands, at the thin gold band on her finger. I'm terrified of starting over again if this doesn't work. I'm terrified that I've bet everything on a stranger, and strangers have been letting me down my whole life. I'll try not to let you down. I'll try not to give you reason to. The ranch appeared, and Eliza's breath caught despite herself. She'd expected rough. She'd expected bare survival, log walls and dirt floors. Instead, she saw a real house. 2 stories of hewn timber with a deep porch and glass windows that caught the afternoon light. A massive barn stood behind it, and corrals spread out in careful patterns, and everything looked maintained, purposeful, built by someone who cared about doing things right. "You built this?" The question came out before she could stop it. Most of it. Hank helped with the heavy lifting. "It's beautiful." "It's functional. Beautiful's a stretch." "It's both." 2 dogs came barreling around the barn, a yellow hound and a black mutt, barking hard enough to shake their whole bodies. Emmett called them to order. "Duke, Bess, enough!" They settled instantly, tails going, noses working overtime on Eliza's skirt. A man emerged from the barn, tall, lean, dark-skinned, with a stillness about him that reminded Eliza of deep water. He moved without hurry, each step deliberate, and his eyes missed nothing. "Hank," Emmett said, jumping down from the wagon. "This is Eliza, my wife." Hank looked at her for a long time, with eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine and survived them anyway. Then he nodded once. "Ma'am, welcome." "Thank you, Mr. Jessup." Just Hank. Then just Eliza. Something softened in his face. Not quite a smile, but approval. A younger man came running from the direction of the corral, sandy-haired and sunburned, grinning like he'd just won a bet. "Is that her? That's her, right? Boss, you actually did it. You got married." He skidded to a stop in front of Eliza, whipped his hat off. "Ma'am, Charlie Polk. I live in the bunkhouse. I eat a lot. I snore. It's a pleasure." "It's nice to meet you, Charlie." "Ma'am, no offense, but you're way prettier than the boss described." He said, respectable looking. I told Hank that could mean anything, but this is way better than anything. "Charlie," Emmett said. "Yes, boss?" "Shut up and help with the trunk." "Yes, boss." Hank and Charlie carried her trunk inside, while Emmett led her through the front door. She stepped into a room that was clean, spare, and utterly devoid of feminine touch. Functional furniture. No curtains, no flowers. A stone fireplace with ashes that needed sweeping. A kitchen that was organized the way a military man would organize it. Everything in rows, everything accessible, nothing decorative. "I know it's not much to look at," Emmett said behind her. "It's clean. It's solid. Everything else is just details." She ran her hand along the kitchen table. "Good wood, well made. I can work with this." He showed her upstairs. 4 rooms off a hallway. He stopped at the first door. "This is the main bedroom. It's yours." "Yours?" "I moved to the back room. Like I said, separate until you say otherwise." She looked at the room. Large bed, clean sheets, a window facing the mountains. His room. She could tell because the wardrobe still held the ghost scent of leather and pine, and there was a dent in the wall beside the bed that she understood immediately. His fist. During a nightmare. She could see it clearly, the shape of knuckles in the plaster. "Emmett." "Yeah?" "Thank you for being honest about the walls." He followed her gaze to the dent. His jaw tightened. "I should have fixed that before you came." "No, I'm glad you didn't." She turned to face him. "I don't want things hidden. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." He held her eyes for 3 beats of her hammering heart. Then he nodded, turned, and headed downstairs. "I've got to check the north fence. Hank spotted a break yesterday. I'll be back by dark." He paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Eliza." "Yes?" "I'm glad you came." "I'm glad you asked." He left. She heard his boots on the porch, heard him speak low to the dogs, heard the horse moving away. Then silence. The enormous, unfamiliar silence of a house that was now hers. She unpacked. Dresses in the wardrobe, her mother's Bible on the nightstand, the box of surgical instruments, scalpels, forceps, needle drivers, suture silk, she hesitated over, then placed in the bottom drawer. Hidden but accessible. She couldn't throw them away. They were the best part of her father, the part that had healed instead of harmed. At 4 o'clock, she went to the kitchen and started cooking. Found flour, sugar, coffee, salt pork, dried beans, eggs from a coop she hadn't explored yet. She made roast chicken, one of the hens that looked past laying age, biscuits from scratch, gravy, and a dried apple pie from stores she found in the pantry. Cooking steadied her. The rhythm of kneading, chopping, stirring. Her hands knew this work the way they knew surgical knots, through repetition so deep it lived in muscle, not memory. Charlie appeared at the kitchen door at 5:30. He stopped dead, sniffed the air like a hunting dog. "Ma'am, is that what I think it is?" "Depends on what you think it is." "I think it's the best thing that's happened to this ranch in 6 years, and I include the new barn in that comparison." "It's just chicken." "Ma'am, with respect, the boss's idea of chicken is to boil it until it surrenders. This is something else entirely." He leaned against the doorframe. "Can I set the table?" "Please." He set 4 places with a focus that suggested he was trying very hard to be useful. Hank came in at 6, washed up, nodded at the food with the same quiet approval he'd shown Eliza earlier. Emmett arrived last, dusty and tired, a new scratch across the back of his right hand. He stopped when he saw the table, stopped when he smelled the food, stopped and just stood there, looking at it, like he'd forgotten what this was. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "Sit down, Emmett. It's getting cold." They sat. They ate. For the first 10 minutes, nobody spoke except to ask for salt or more biscuits. Then Charlie broke. "I'm going to say it. This is the best meal I've ever had, and my mama was a good cook, so that's not nothing." "Charlie's right," Hank said, quiet but firm. "This is something special." Emmett ate steadily, methodically. He didn't gush, didn't exclaim, but he took seconds, and thirds on the biscuits. And when Eliza brought out the pie, she saw his eyes close for just a second when he tasted it. "Thank you," he said. Just that. "You're welcome." After dinner, Charlie and Hank retreated to the bunkhouse. Emmett helped Eliza clear the table, moving around her in the kitchen with surprising awareness of the space, never crowding, never colliding. "You're good at that," she said. "At what?" "Moving around someone without getting in the way." "Military habit. Close quarters, you learn to navigate." They washed dishes in silence. He washed, she dried. His hands in the water were careful with the plates, gentle in a way that contrasted with their size and damage. "Emmett?" "Yeah?" "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without deciding what it means." He stopped washing, turned to face her, water dripping from his fingers. "I have medical knowledge," she said. "Real knowledge. My father trained me from the time I was 12. Not officially, not legally, but thoroughly. I can stitch a wound, set a bone, treat infection, dose medicine. I assisted in surgeries for years before the drinking got bad." "I know, Ruth told me." "Ruth told you I assisted. She didn't tell you the rest." Eliza gripped the dish towel. "The night Mrs. Coleman died, I wasn't home. I was visiting Ruth in the city. If I'd been there, I would have seen that my father was drunk. I would have stopped him. I would have done the surgery myself if I had to. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. I've gone over it 1,000 times. If I'd been there, if I'd come home an hour earlier, if I'd hidden the bottles better, locked the office, done something, anything different. But you weren't there. No, I wasn't. And that's what eats at you. Not what he did. What you didn't do. She looked at him, this stranger she'd married 10 hours ago, and saw that he understood completely. Because he carried the same weight. Different war, different casualties, same impossible math of guilt. Yes, she whispered. Emmett dried his hands, hung the towel on its hook, turned to her with those pale blue eyes that held more pain than any eyes should hold. First week at Shiloh, he said. My best friend, Thomas Early, took a bullet in the gut. Right next to me. I could have dragged him to the surgeon's tent, should have. But the line was breaking and the sergeant screamed for us to hold. And I held. I held the line while Thomas bled out 6 feet away, calling my name. He said it flat, the way he'd listed his defects yesterday. Clinical. Controlled. But his left hand trembled against his thigh. I know what it's like, he said. To live with the thing you didn't do. To replay it every night until the replaying becomes its own kind of wound. I can't fix that for you. Can't fix it for myself. But I can tell you that carrying it alone is worse than carrying it with someone who understands. Eliza stared at him. This man she'd known less than a day had just reached into her chest and touched the thing she'd hidden from everyone. The guilt, the shame, the endless replay of, if only. Emmett Calloway, she said, and her voice finally cracked, just a little, just enough. I think we might be the 2 most damaged people in Montana. Probably. The ghost of a smile. But damaged things still work. They just work different. She nodded, folded the dish towel, set it on the counter. Good night, Emmett. Good night, Eliza. She climbed the stairs. He didn't follow. She heard him banking the fire, checking the doors, speaking low to the dogs. Then his footsteps on the stairs, passing her door without pausing, continuing to the room at the hall's end. A door closing softly. Eliza lay in the dark, in her husband's bed that was now her bed, and pressed her hand to her chest where something had cracked open. Not broken. Cracked. Like a seed. She didn't sleep for a long time, but for the first time in months, it wasn't dread that kept her awake. It was something worse. Something more dangerous. Hope. And 3 doors down, she heard Emmett Calloway start to scream. The screaming lasted 11 minutes. Eliza knew because she counted. Sat upright in bed, hands gripping the quilt, counting seconds the way her father had taught her to count a patient's pulse. Steady, measured, clinical. Because if she counted, she wouldn't run. And every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run. Not away, toward. But Emmett had told her, don't touch me. Don't come close. Say my name if you want, but don't come close until I know where I am. So she sat in the dark and listened to a grown man scream like he was dying, and she counted, and she waited. At minute 7, something hit a wall. Hard. The whole house shook. At minute 9, the screaming became words. Fragmented, gutted, torn out of some place deeper than sleep. Thomas! Thomas, hold on! Hold on, I'm coming! At minute 11, silence. Then footsteps, unsteady, down the hall, down the stairs. The front door opening and closing. Eliza went to the window. Emmett stood in the yard in his undershirt, barefoot, hands on his knees, breathing like he'd sprinted a mile. The dogs circled him, whining. Doot pressed his body against Emmett's leg, and Emmett dropped one hand to the dog's head and held it there. 5 minutes. 10. Then he straightened, walked to the pump, worked the handle, and stuck his head under the water. Held it there so long, Eliza's lungs ached in sympathy. He went back inside. She heard him in the kitchen, heard the stove door open, heard him building a fire he didn't need because the night was warm. But he needed something to do with his hands. She understood that. She didn't go down. He hadn't asked her to. And tonight, respecting the boundary mattered more than offering comfort he wasn't ready to receive. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling until dawn grayed the window. When she came downstairs at 5, Emmett was already at the table, coffee made, dressed for work. The only evidence of the night was a fresh scrape across his right knuckles and a darkness under his eyes that looked permanent. "Morning," he said, normal voice, steady. "Morning. Coffee smells good." "Made it strong. Figured we both needed it." She poured a cup, sat across from him, drank. The silence between them held weight, but not the bad kind. The kind that said, "I know, and you know, and neither of us needs to pretend." "Every night?" she asked. "No, maybe twice a week. Sometimes less. Sometimes more when the weather changes or something sets it off." "What sets it off?" "Gunshots, thunder, sometimes nothing, sometimes just the dark." "Was last night bad, compared to usual?" He looked at her. "You're asking like a doctor." "Force of habit." "It was middling. I've had worse." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I punched the wall. Sorry about that." "I heard. I'll patch it today." "Emmett?" "Yeah?" "You don't have to apologize for being hurt." His jaw tightened. He drank his coffee, set the cup down with a precision that spoke of enormous self-control. "Charlie and Hank don't hear it," he said. "Bunkhouse is far enough. But you're right down the hall. If it's too much, it's not. You don't know that yet. Then I'll tell you if it becomes too much. But last night wasn't too much. It was just real." He looked at her for a long time. She held his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't soften it with a smile, just met him where he was. "All right," he said finally. "We should eat. Long day ahead." They ate. He left for the north pasture. She cleaned the kitchen and found the dent in the upstairs wall. Fresh plaster dust on the floor. She swept it up and didn't patch it. Let it stay. Evidence. Honesty. The thing they'd promised each other. The first week became the second. The second became the third. Eliza learned the ranch the way she'd once learned anatomy, systematically, thoroughly, taking nothing for granted. Charlie showed her the chickens, the milk cow, the garden plot. Hank showed her the root cellar, the smokehouse, the creek where the water ran clean enough to drink. Emmett taught her to ride a bay mare named Penny, who was patient with beginners and unimpressed by everything. "Heels down," Emmett said, walking beside her in the corral. "Weight in your stirrups, not your hands." "I'm trying." "You're gripping. Let go of the horn." "If I let go, I'll fall." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because Penny hasn't thrown a rider in 8 years, and she's not going to start with you." Eliza let go. Penny walked on, unbothered. Eliza sat straighter, found her balance, and felt something shift. "There," Emmett said. "Now you're riding." She fell off twice that week, got back on both times. The second time, she had a bruise on her hip the size of a fist, and Charlie asked if she needed ice, and Hank told Charlie to mind his business. And Emmett said nothing but left a jar of liniment outside her door that night. She found it in the morning, used it, didn't mention it, neither did he. The nightmares came twice more that first month. The second time, Eliza sat in the hallway outside his door, her back against the wall, and talked. Not loud, just her normal voice, saying his name, saying, "You're home, Emmett. You're in Montana. You're safe. The war's over. You're home." She didn't know if he could hear her through the door, through the nightmare, through whatever hell his sleeping mind had dragged him back to, but she talked anyway. Because doing nothing wasn't something she could live with. Not anymore. The screaming stopped sooner that time, 8 minutes instead of 11. She heard him breathing on the other side of the door, ragged, broken, but slowing. "Eliza?" His voice, wrecked, barely there. "I'm here." "You shouldn't be." "I know. I'm here anyway." A long silence. Then the door opened. He stood in the frame, shirt soaked with sweat, his eyes red, his left hand shaking badly. He looked at her, sitting on the floor with her nightgown pooled around her and her back against his wall, and something in his face collapsed. "You were talking," he said. "I heard you. Through it. Like a rope in the dark." "Good. Then I'll keep doing it." He slid down the doorframe until he was sitting across from her in the hallway, their knees almost touching, both of them on the floor at 2 a.m, like two children hiding from a thunderstorm. "Thomas Early," he said. He was 21. Had a girl back home named Sarah. Showed me her picture every single day for 3 months. Every day. Like I'd forget what she looked like. "Tell me about him." He could whistle any song after hearing it once. Couldn't sing worth a damn, but he could whistle like a bird. Used to drive the sergeant crazy. Emmett's voice was raw, but steady, like he was pulling these words out of a place he'd kept locked for years. He wanted to be a teacher after the war. Said he'd go back to Ohio and teach children to read and maybe marry Sarah and have a farm with chickens. He sounds like a good man. He was the best man I ever knew. And I left him in the dirt because a sergeant told me to hold a line. "You were a soldier. You followed orders." "I was his friend. I should have followed him." Eliza reached out, slowly, not touching him, just placing her hand on the floor between them, palm up. An offering, not a demand. "You can't save everyone," she said. "Believe me, I know." He looked at her hand, looked at it for a long time. Then he placed his over it, just resting there, the tremor running through his fingers into hers. They sat like that until the shaking stopped. By the 4th week, the town had formed its opinion about Eliza Calloway. She knew because Luisa Reyes told her. Luisa ran the boarding house and saloon in Copper Bend. A Mexican widow with sharp eyes and a laugh that could be heard 3 buildings away. She'd shown up at the ranch one Tuesday with a basket of tamales and a complete lack of interest in social niceties. "They're talking about you," Luisa said, settling into a kitchen chair like she owned it. "I assumed. Half of them think Emmett's crazy for marrying another woman after Clara. The other half think you're crazy for agreeing." "Which half are you?" Luisa bit into a tamale. "I think you're both crazy. But crazy people build the best things. Sane people just maintain them." "That's very philosophical." "I'm a philosophical woman. Also, Tom Briggs came into the saloon last night asking about you." Eliza stiffened. She'd heard the name. Margaret had mentioned it. Emmett hadn't. "Who is Tom Briggs?" "Owns the bank. Owns half the buildings in town. Wants to own the other half." Luisa's expression hardened. "He's been after Emmett's land for 2 years. Wants to sell it to the railroad. Emmett won't sell. Makes Briggs very unhappy." "What was he asking about me?" "Where you came from, who your family was, what happened in Philadelphia." Luisa met her eyes. "Somebody told him about your father, Eliza. I don't know who. But Briggs knows. The floor dropped out from under her. How much does he know? Enough to make trouble if he wants to. And Tom Briggs always wants to make trouble. Eliza sat down. Her hands were steady. Her pulse wasn't. Does Emmett know that Briggs is asking? If he doesn't, he will soon. This is a small town. Small towns have big mouths. Louisa leaned forward. Listen to me. Briggs is going to come after you. Not physically, he's too smart for that. But he'll use your past like a knife. He'll tell the church ladies. He'll tell the school board. He'll make sure everyone in Copper Bend knows that Emmett Calloway's new wife is the daughter of a killer. My father wasn't a killer. He was a drunk who made a fatal mistake. In a courtroom, that's a distinction. In a church pew, it's not. Eliza felt the old familiar weight settle on her chest. Philadelphia all over again. The whispers, the turned backs, the slow social suffocation. She'd traveled 2,000 miles, and the stain had followed her. What do I do? Louisa stood, brushed crumbs off her skirt. You do what frontier women have always done. You stand up straight, and you dare them to knock you down. She left the tamales and her advice and rode back to town. Eliza was still sitting at the kitchen table when Emmett came in at dusk, dirty and tired from moving cattle. He took one look at her face and stopped. What happened? Sit down. He sat. Tom Briggs knows about my father, about what happened in Philadelphia. Louisa told me he's been asking around town. Emmett's expression didn't change, not a flicker. But his hands, flat on the table, went very still. How long have you known Briggs wanted your land? Eliza asked. 2 years. And you didn't tell me? Didn't think it was your problem. I'm your wife. Everything that threatens this ranch is my problem. He looked at her. Something moved behind those pale eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You're right. I should have told you. What has he done so far? Made offers, low ones. I refused. He tried to buy up the water rights upstream. I got there first. He filed a complaint with the land office saying my boundary survey was wrong. Judge threw it out. He's been circling, looking for an angle. And now he has one. Me. Your father's mistake isn't an angle. It's gossip. Gossip is a weapon, Emmett. I've seen it destroy lives. I've lived it. He stood, paced to the stove, back. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words too hard to swallow. I won't let him use you to get to this ranch. It's not about what you'll let. It's about what he'll do. If he turns this town against me, against us, we lose more than reputation. We lose neighbors who help during storms. We lose the mercantile giving us credit. We lose Charlie's church friends and Hank's respect in town. Hank's respect doesn't depend on what Tom Briggs says. Maybe not Hank's, but others? When the banker tells people your wife's father was a drunk who killed a woman on an operating table, how many of those people are going to bring casseroles and offer to help with branding? Silence. Hard, sharp silence. Then we get ahead of it, Emmett said. How? We tell the truth first, before Briggs can twist it. We go to church Sunday. We look people in the eye. And if they ask, you tell them what you told me. Honest, all of it. Let them decide for themselves, instead of letting Briggs decide for them. That's a risk. Everything out here is a risk. The difference is whether you take it standing up or lying down. Sunday came like a reckoning. Eliza wore her green dress, the one she'd married in. Emmett wore his dark suit, with the cut on his jaw healed to a thin line. They rode to town together on the wagon, Hank driving, Charlie riding alongside. The church was small and full, every pew occupied. Eliza felt the stares the moment she walked in. Curious stares. Measuring stairs. The kind that strip you down to see what you're made of. She sat beside Emmett in the third row. He didn't touch her. Didn't need to. His presence beside her was solid, certain, a wall between her and whatever was coming. The sermon was about forgiveness. Eliza would have laughed at the irony if she'd had any humor left. Afterward, in the yard, the congregation milled and talked. May Parker, the nearest ranch wife, approached first. Pleasant, cautious. "Mrs. Calloway, so nice to see you in town." "Thank you, Mrs. Parker." "I hear you're settling in well at the ranch. Emmett's a fortunate man." "We're fortunate to have each other." Then Tom Briggs appeared. He didn't approach. Didn't need to. He stood near the church gate talking to 3 other men, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Shame about the Calloway woman's family. Heard her father killed a patient. Operated while he was blind drunk. Woman bled to death right there on the table. And the daughter just watched it happen." He said it conversationally, like discussing the weather, like spreading poison was just making small talk. Eliza's blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. Emmett turned, slowly, the kind of slow that made smart men back up. "Emmett," Eliza grabbed his arm. "Don't." "He's lying. You weren't there that night. I know what he's doing. And if you hit him, he wins. He gets exactly what he wants. You looking violent. And me looking like someone who needs defending because there's something to defend against." Emmett's arm was iron under her hand. Every muscle coiled. She could feel the fury rolling off him like heat. "Please," she said. "Let me." He looked at her. She looked back. Something passed between them, a negotiation conducted entirely in silence. Then he stepped back. One step. Enough. Eliza released his arm, straightened her spine, and walked directly toward Tom Briggs. The men around him went quiet. Briggs turned. He was 50, well-dressed, with the smooth face of a man who'd never done hard work, and the eyes of a man who'd done plenty of hard deals. "Mr. Briggs," Eliza said, "I don't believe we've met. I'm Eliza Calloway." "Mrs. Calloway." Smile like a closed door. "Welcome to Copper Bend." "Thank you. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. You seem to have some facts about my family, but they're incomplete. May I fill in the rest?" The churchyard had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. Eliza could feel it, the collective held breath of a small town waiting to see what would happen. "My father was Dr. Henry Mercer of Philadelphia. He was a good doctor for 20 years. Then he became an alcoholic. He operated on a woman named Mrs. Coleman while intoxicated, and she died. He was sued. He lost everything. And then he killed himself." She said it clear and steady and didn't look away from Briggs's face. "I was not present the night Mrs. Coleman died. I was visiting family. If I had been there, I would have stopped him. But I wasn't, and I've carried that every day since." Briggs's smile didn't waver. "That's a tragic story, Mrs. Calloway." "It is. It's also mine, not yours. And I'd appreciate you not telling it to people who haven't asked to hear it." "I was merely expressing concern for the community. A woman with that kind of family history has medical knowledge that saved a ranch hand's horse from colic last week and stitched up Charlie Polk's hand when he cut it on barbed wire. But you didn't mention that part, did you, Mr. Briggs?" Silence. The churchyard was a held breath. "I reckon what Mrs. Calloway does on her own ranch is her business," a voice said from behind her. Hank. Standing with his arms crossed, his voice quiet but carrying. "Same as what any of us do on ours." "Hank's right," May Parker said, stepping forward. I don't see how Philadelphia gossip has anything to do with Copper Bend." Briggs looked from Eliza to Hank to May. The smooth smile never cracked, but something shifted behind his eyes. A recalculation. "Of course," he said. "I meant no offense, Mrs. Calloway. Just making conversation." "Of course." Eliza matched his smile exactly. "Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Mr. Briggs." She turned and walked back to Emmett. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together so no one would see. Emmett looked at her. Just looked. Then he did something he'd never done in public. He took her hand. Held it. In front of the whole town, in front of Tom Briggs and the church ladies and every pair of watching eyes in Copper Bend. "Let's go home," he said. They walked to the wagon. Hank was already on the seat. Charlie rode up on his horse, grinning like he'd just watched the best show of his life. "Ma'am," Charlie said, "that was the finest thing I've ever seen. And I once watched a man ride a bull backwards." "Thank you, Charlie." "Briggs looked like he swallowed a wasp." "Charlie," Emmett said. "Yes, boss?" "For once in your life, you said the right thing." On the ride home, Emmett held the reins with his right hand. His left hand rested on his thigh. Halfway back, without looking at her, he turned it palm up on the seat between them. Eliza looked at it. That scarred, trembling hand offered the same way she'd offered hers on the hallway floor at 2 a.m. She took it. They rode the rest of the way in silence, hand in hand, and neither of them let go until they reached the ranch gate. That night, after dinner, after Charlie's jokes and Hank's quiet nod of approval, after the dishes and the dogs and the locking of doors, Emmett stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Eliza?" She turned on the 3rd step. "What you did today, standing up to Briggs, in front of everyone." He worked his jaw. "Nobody's ever done that for me before. Stood beside me like that." "Clara didn't?" "Clara didn't know how to fight. She only knew how to leave." "I don't know how to leave. I only know how to fight." He looked up at her from the bottom of the stairs, and his eyes held something she hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, not respect. Something raw. Something that scared him more than any nightmare. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Emmett." She climbed the stairs. He didn't follow. But this time, when she lay in the dark and listened, there was no screaming, just silence. The deep, exhausted silence of a man who, for the first time in a very long time, had slept through the whole night. 3 weeks of quiet. That's what they got before the world cracked open. Eliza had started to believe the quiet was real. She'd fallen into the ranch rhythm, like it was a heartbeat she'd always known but never heard. Up before dawn, coffee with Emmett in the kitchen, their shoulders almost touching, their silences growing warmer. Breakfast for the men. Work until her hands ached and her back screamed, and she fell into bed grateful for exhaustion, because exhaustion left no room for doubt. She'd stopped counting the nightmares. They still came, twice a week, sometimes 3. But she'd learned the pattern, learned to sit in the hallway and talk him through it, learned which nights were bad and which were worse, learned that afterward he'd sit on the floor across from her and they'd talk about things neither of them could say in daylight. He told her about the march to Corinth. She told him about the first time she stitched a wound at 13, her hands steadier than her father's. He told her about the sound of cannon fire, how it lived in his bones. She told him about the smell of laudanum, how she still couldn't walk past a pharmacy without her stomach turning. They were learning each other, slowly, carefully. The way you learn to walk on ice, testing every step before you trust it. And then the fever came. Charlie brought it back from town on a Tuesday. He'd gone to pick up supplies at the mercantile. Came home looking gray and sweating through his shirt. "Just a headache," he said at dinner, pushing food around his plate. "Probably the heat." "You're not eating," Eliza said. "Not hungry." "Charlie Polk not hungry," Hank said. "That's a first." "I'm fine, just tired." By midnight, he wasn't fine. Eliza heard the retching from the bunkhouse, pulled on her robe, and ran across the yard with her father's medical bag. She found Charlie on his bunk, burning hot, shaking so hard the bed frame rattled. "How long?" she asked Hank, who was already there, holding a lantern. "Started an hour ago. Temperature's climbing fast." Eliza pressed her hand to Charlie's forehead. Her stomach dropped. She'd felt fevers like this before. In Philadelphia, in the wards her father had taken her to as a girl. Fevers that moved fast and killed faster. "Charlie, can you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." His voice was thin, young, stripped of all the bravado she'd grown used to. "I feel real bad." "I know. I'm going to help you, but I need you to tell me everything. Where did you go in town today? Who did you talk to? Did you drink anything unusual?" "Just went to the mercantile. Talked to Mr. Alder. Had water from the pump outside the saloon." "The pump outside the saloon?" Eliza looked at Hank. "Who else uses that pump?" "Half the town." Eliza's mind raced. Contaminated water. Summer heat. A pump shared by dozens of people in a town with no sanitation system to speak of. "Hank, I need cold water, as much as you can get. And clean rags. We have to bring this fever down." "What is it?" "I don't know yet. Could be typhoid, could be cholera, could be something else. But if it's the water, Charlie won't be the only one." Hank moved without another word. Eliza worked through the night, sponging Charlie down, forcing sips of boiled water between bouts of vomiting, monitoring his pulse and temperature with the methodical precision her father had drilled into her before the drinking stole his hands. Emmett appeared at the bunkhouse door at 3 a.m. He'd heard the commotion, dressed, come to investigate. "How bad?" he asked from the doorway. "Bad enough. Don't come in." "Eliza, I mean it, Emmett. If this is contagious, you can't be exposed. The ranch needs you functional. Stay back." He stood in the doorway, and she could feel his struggle, the need to help, fighting the logic of her words. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" "More water, firewood to keep it boiling, and someone should ride to town at first light. If the pump's contaminated, people need to know." "I'll go myself." "Send Hank. You stay here. If Charlie gets worse, I might need you to ride to Butte for the doctor." "Butte's 40 miles. "I know what Butte is." Their eyes met across the bunkhouse. Fear and trust and something fiercer than both. "All right," he said. "I'll be at the house. You need me, you holler." Charlie's fever broke at dawn. Eliza was sitting beside his bunk, her back against the wall, her hands raw from wringing rags. He opened his eyes, looked at her, and said, "Am I dead?" "Not today." "Because you look like an angel, and I figured, you're definitely not dead. Dead men don't flirt." He tried to laugh. It came out as a cough. "Ma'am, I'm real sorry for the trouble." "Don't apologize. Just drink this." She held boiled water to his lips. Small sips. Hank rode into town at first light and came back with news that turned Eliza's blood to ice. 7 people sick, same symptoms. All used the pump outside Luis's saloon. Doc Pruitt's seen 3 of them. He says it's summer complaint. Told them to rest and drink whiskey. Whiskey, Eliza wanted to scream. He told fever patients to drink whiskey. He's 73 and half blind, Eliza. He's doing what he knows. What he knows is going to kill people. She stood, her exhaustion vanishing under a wave of fury and purpose. "I need to go to town." Emmett was at the kitchen table when she came in. He'd been up all night too, she could tell. Coffee cups lined up like soldiers on the counter. "Charlie's stable. Fever broke. He'll need fluids and rest for a week." She sat across from him. "Emmett, 7 people in town are sick. The water pump is contaminated. Doc Pruitt is prescribing whiskey. If someone doesn't intervene, people are going to die. And you want to be that someone." "I am that someone. I have the training. I have the knowledge. I have my father's instruments." "You're not a doctor." "I know I'm not a doctor, but right now, I'm the closest thing Copper Bend has." She leaned forward. "I've treated fever patients. I've managed contaminated water cases. I know how to bring down a fever without poisoning someone with alcohol. I can help." "And what happens when they find out who taught you? When Briggs tells everyone that the woman treating their sick is the daughter of a man who killed his own patient?" The words hit like a fist. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "Then they can refuse my help. That's their right. But I'm going to offer it." Emmett stared at her. She stared back. "You know what this could cost us," he said quietly. "I know what it'll cost them if I don't." He closed his eyes, opened them. "I'll drive you." They rode into town at 9. Copper Bend looked wrong, quieter than it should have been on a Wednesday morning. The Mercantile was open but empty. The saloon's doors were shut. A sign on the pump read, "Do not use," in crooked letters. Louisa met them at the boarding house door. Her face told Eliza everything. "3 more since dawn. The Miller boy, he's 6. Mrs. Alder from the Mercantile. And old Pete from the livery." Louisa's voice was flat, controlled, the way people get when panic is too close to a ford. "Pruitt's in there now. He gave the Miller boy laudanum." "Laudanum? For a 6-year-old with a fever?" "That's what I said. He told me to mind my own business." Eliza pushed past her into the boarding house. The main room had been turned into a makeshift sick ward. 3 beds pulled from upstairs. Bodies in them, pale and shaking. A woman Eliza didn't know was sponging Mrs. Alder's forehead. In the corner, a small boy curled on his side, whimpering. Doc Pruitt stood over old Pete, a man who looked 80 but was probably 60, pouring whiskey into a cup. His hands shook. His glasses were filthy. He looked up when Eliza entered and squinted. "Who are you?" "Eliza Calloway. I have medical training, doctor. I'd like to help." "Don't need help. Got it under control." "With respect, sir, you prescribed laudanum to a child with a fever. That's not under control. That's dangerous." Pruitt drew himself up, all 5'4" of him, bristling with offended authority. "I've been doctoring this town for 30 years, young woman. I don't need some rancher's wife telling me—" "The pump water is contaminated, likely bacterial. The treatment is fluids, fever management, and isolation. Not whiskey, not laudanum. Especially not for children." "And where did you learn that? Some fancy Eastern ladies' magazine?" "From my father, Dr. Henry Mercer. He trained me in clinical medicine for 12 years. The room went quiet. Pruitt stared at her. The woman sponging Mrs. Alder stopped. Even the Miller boy's whimpering seemed to pause. "Mercer?" Pruitt said slowly. "The Philadelphia Mercer? The one who killed that woman?" There it was. The thing she couldn't outrun. "Yes," Eliza said. "That Mercer. And everything I know about saving lives, I learned from him before he destroyed his own. So you can judge me for who my father was, or you can let me help your patients. But while you're deciding, that boy in the corner needs his fever brought down, and laudanum isn't going to do it." Pruitt's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I don't need to listen to this," he said, and walked out. The room held its breath. Eliza turned to Louisa. "I need boiling water, clean cloth, salt, and sugar. Equal measures of salt and sugar dissolved in boiled water, cooled to room temperature. As much as you can make." "Done." Louisa moved. Eliza went to the Miller boy first, Tommy. 6 years old, sandy hair plastered to his head with sweat, eyes glassy and unfocused. She felt his pulse, checked his temperature by touch, looked at his gums, his eyes, the color of his skin. "Tommy, I'm Mrs. Calloway. I'm going to help you feel better. Can you drink something for me?" "Don't want to." "I know, sweetheart, but your body needs water. Just a little. Can you try?" He tried, kept it down. Eliza soaked cloths in cool water and placed them on his forehead, his wrists, his neck. Basic. Simple. The things her father had taught her before anything else. Bring the temperature down. Hydrate. Let the body fight. She moved to Mrs. Alder. Same treatment. Then old Pete, who was worse. His breathing shallow and fast. His skin papery and hot. "Pete, stay with me. I need you to drink." "Rather have whiskey," Pete rasped. "I know. Water first, whiskey later. Deal?" "Bossy woman." "So I've been told." Emmett stood in the doorway the entire time. Not helping, not interfering. Just there. Solid. Present. A wall between Eliza and whatever was coming from outside. And something was coming. She could feel it. It arrived at noon in the form of Tom Briggs. He walked through the door with the confidence of a man who owned the building, which he did. 2 men flanked him, ranchers from the valley. Big men with skeptical faces. "Mrs. Calloway." Briggs's voice was silk over steel. "I hear you've been playing doctor." Eliza didn't look up from Pete's pulse. "I've been treating patients that your town doctor abandoned." "Pruitt says you overstepped. Says you have no credentials, no license, no authority to practice medicine in this territory." "Pruitt prescribed laudanum to a 6-year-old with a fever. If that's the standard of care in Copper Bend, this town needs me more than it knows." "That's not what the town thinks. Most folks I've talked to are concerned about a woman with your family history touching their sick." Now Eliza looked up. "Which folks? The ones you talked to, or the ones you told?" Briggs's smile didn't move. "Does it matter? The result's the same. People don't trust you, and you can't force medicine on people who don't trust the hand it comes from." The room was quiet again. That terrible small-town quiet where everyone is listening and no one wants to be the first to speak. Then a voice from behind Briggs, small, raw, furious. Tommy Miller's mother. A woman Eliza had never seen before, thin and red-eyed and shaking with something that was either fear or rage. "My boy's fever came down 2 degrees in 3 hours," she said. 2 degrees. Pruitt had him on laudanum that was making it worse. This woman walked in and fixed it. I don't care who her daddy was. I care that my son's alive." "Mrs. Miller," Briggs started. "Don't you Mrs. Miller me, Tom Briggs. You don't have children. You don't know what it's like to watch your boy burn up while the only doctor in 40 miles pours whiskey down his throat. This woman helped my son. That's all I need to know." "She's right," Mrs. Alder's husband, standing in the corner. He'd been so quiet, Eliza hadn't noticed him. "My wife's breathing better than she has all day. Whatever Mrs. Calloway's doing, it's working." Briggs looked from Mrs. Miller to Mr. Alder to the rest of the room, the political math shifting behind his eyes. "Well," he said, "I certainly didn't come here to interfere with anyone's care. I was merely expressing the community's concern. If folks are comfortable, Then, of course, they're comfortable, Emmett said from the doorway. First words he'd spoken, low and flat, and carrying the weight of a man who had nothing left to lose, and knew it. Briggs looked at Emmett. Emmett looked back. The air between them could have cut glass. Of course, Briggs repeated. He adjusted his hat. Well, Mrs. Calloway, I hope your patients recover quickly. The town appreciates your efforts. He left. The two ranchers followed, one of them glancing back at Eliza with something that might have been respect. Louisa appeared with the salt sugar water. That man, she said, watching Briggs cross the street, has the soul of a rattlesnake and the smile of a preacher. Don't turn your back on him. I don't intend to. Eliza worked through the afternoon. 3 more patients arrived, brought by family members who'd heard from Mrs. Miller or Mr. Alder that the Calloway woman was helping. She treated them all: fluids, fever management, clean water, rest. By evening, every patient was stable. Tommy Miller was sitting up, asking for food. Mrs. Alder was sleeping peacefully. Even old Pete had stopped cursing and started cooperating, which Eliza counted as a medical miracle. She was washing her hands in Louisa's kitchen when her legs buckled. She grabbed the counter and held on, the room spinning. She'd been on her feet for 18 hours, hadn't eaten since the previous night. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day drained out like someone had pulled a plug. Sit down, Emmett's voice, his hand on her elbow, guiding her to a chair. When did you last eat? I don't remember. That's not an answer. Yesterday. He disappeared, came back with bread, cheese, and cold beef that Louisa must have provided. Set it in front of her, poured water. Eat. All of it. She ate. He sat across from her and watched, the same way she'd watched Charlie eat, the same way she watched all her patients, with the focused attention of someone who has decided that this person's survival matters more than anything else. You saved that boy, he said. I gave him water and brought his fever down. That's not heroic. That's basic. Pruitt was going to kill him with laudanum. Pruitt is old and scared, and using the only tools he has. I'm angry at the situation, not the man. I'm angry at the man. I know, but anger doesn't help patients. Only action does. He reached across the table, took her hand, held it the way he'd held it on the wagon ride home from church, firm and intentional and shaking slightly. You were magnificent today. You know that. I was scared the entire time. That's what magnificent looks like. She looked at their joined hands, his scarred, hers raw from hours of washing. Both of them damaged, both of them holding on. Emmett. Yeah? When the Miller boy's fever spiked, and I was sponging him down, and he was crying, and I didn't know if it was going to work. For a second, just 1 second, I saw my father. I saw his hands on a patient. And I froze. But you didn't stop. No, I didn't stop. That's the difference, Eliza, between you and your father. He stopped. You didn't. The words hit something deep inside her, something she'd been carrying since Philadelphia, since the funeral, since the day she'd burned his last letter. The guilt, the shame, the fear that she was him, that his weakness lived in her blood, that one day her hands would shake and someone would die because she wasn't enough. I'm not him, she said, and for the first time, she believed it. No, Emmett said, you're not. They drove home in darkness. The ranch house appeared against the stars, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Eliza didn't see a stranger's house. She saw hers. Inside, Hank had dinner waiting. He and Charlie, still pale but sitting up, had managed soup and biscuits. Charlie grinned weakly from the kitchen table. Heard you told off Doc Pruitt and Tom Briggs in the same day. Ma'am, you're my hero. Eat your soup, Charlie. Yes, ma'am. Hank caught Eliza's eye as she passed. The town's talking about you. I know. They're saying good things, most of them. Most? Briggs has friends, but fewer than he thinks. Hank paused. You did right today, Eliza. Henry Mercer's daughter did right. That means something. Her throat closed. She nodded because speaking was impossible. After dinner, after the dishes, after checking Charlie one more time and dosing him with fluids and strict instructions to sleep, Eliza climbed the stairs. She was so tired her vision blurred. Emmett followed her up, stopped in the hallway between their doors. Eliza. She turned. He stood there, this big, broken, beautiful man, with his scarred hands and his haunted eyes, and his heart that he'd kept locked for years behind walls 3 inches thick. He stood there and looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his feet. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear it. All right. When Clara left, I told myself it was because I was too damaged, too broken, that no one could live with what the war did to me. I believed that for 2 years, built it into a fact, used it like armor. He stepped closer. Then you showed up, and you sat outside my door during the nightmares, and you held my hand on the floor at 2 a.m., and you rode into town today and saved a child's life while the whole town watched. And you stood up to Briggs with my name on your back, like it was something worth defending. His voice cracked, just barely. I'm not good at this. I told you that first day. I'm not good at words or feelings or any of the things that make a person easy to love. But Eliza... He took her face in both hands. The tremor was there, always there, but his eyes were steady. I think I'm falling in love with you. And it scares me worse than Shiloh. Eliza's breath stopped. Her heart didn't. It hammered so hard she was sure he could feel it through her skin. Emmett Calloway, she said, and her voice shook, and she let it. You are the most difficult, stubborn, infuriating man I've ever met. You can't tell me what you're feeling until you've analyzed it from 6 different angles. You punch walls instead of talking. You make coffee so strong it could strip paint. And you gave me an envelope full of escape money on the first day because you cared more about my freedom than your loneliness. She put her hands over his. I'm falling in love with you too. And I'm not scared. Because the scariest thing already happened. I already lost everything once. Falling in love after that is just gravity. He kissed her. Not like the wedding kiss, brief and contractual. This kiss was real, desperate and tender and years in the making, his mouth warm against hers, his hands in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt. She tasted coffee and dust and something underneath that was just him, just Emmett, just the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to find, without knowing she was looking. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. Not because we're married, because I want you there. Yes. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He took her hand and led her down the hall, not to her room, to his, the one with the dent in the wall, and the narrow bed, and the ghosts of 1,000 nightmares. She walked in and didn't flinch. That night, in Emmett Calloway's bed, with his arms around her and his heartbeat against her back, and the Montana darkness pressing soft against the windows, Eliza felt the last wall between them fall. Not with a crash, with a whisper, like a held breath finally released. And when he woke at 3 a.m., gasping, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. She didn't run. She pulled him close and said his name and held on until the shaking stopped. "I'm here," she said. "You're home." He pressed his face into her neck. "Don't leave." "I won't." "Promise." "I promise, Emmett. I'm not Clara. I'm not going anywhere." He held her so tight it hurt. She held him back. And outside, the ranch sat quiet under the stars, and the cattle grazed in the dark pastures. And somewhere in Copper Bend, a small boy named Tommy Miller slept peacefully for the first time in days, because a woman who'd lost everything had chosen to give what she had left. 2 months married, and Eliza Calloway woke every morning in a bed that smelled like pine and leather, and the man sleeping beside her. She'd learned the architecture of his body the way she'd learned the ranch, thoroughly, with attention to every scar and story they carried. The shrapnel mark on his left shoulder, the burn across his ribs from a cannon flash, the crooked finger on his right hand that he'd set himself because there was no surgeon left standing at Shiloh. She'd learned his rhythms, too. The good mornings when he kissed her forehead before his boots hit the floor. The bad mornings when he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, and she knew to give him 5 minutes before speaking. The rare mornings when he reached for her in the half-dark and pulled her close, and said nothing at all, because some things live deeper than language. The nightmares still came, but less often. And when they did, she was there, always there, and each time, he came back faster. It was late August when Eliza's body told her something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She was in the garden pulling carrots when the dizziness hit, sharp, sudden, dropping her to her knees in the dirt. The world tilted sideways, her stomach heaved. She pressed her hands flat against the ground and breathed through it, the way she'd taught 100 patients to breathe through pain. It passed. She sat back on her heels and stared at her hands, muddy and trembling, and counted backward through the weeks. 6 weeks late, maybe 7. "Senora," Hank's voice, careful, from the garden gate. He'd started calling her that after Louisa told him it suited her better than ma'am. "You all right?" "I'm fine. Stood up too fast." Hank looked at her the way he looked at a horse favoring a leg, knowing something was off, not pushing. "Water's on the porch," he said. "Drink some." She drank. She went back to work. She didn't tell Emmett. Not yet. Not until she was sure. Because the thing growing inside her, if it was what she thought it was, would crack Emmett Calloway's world wide open. And she needed to know how to hold the pieces before she broke them. She was sure by the 2nd week of September. The morning sickness that struck at noon, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could touch, the tenderness in her body that whispered new life with every heartbeat. She'd seen this in dozens of patients. She knew the signs the way she knew her own pulse. She told Louisa first. Rode into town on a Tuesday when Emmett was checking the South Range, sat in Louisa's kitchen and said it flat. "I'm pregnant." Louisa set down her coffee cup, picked it up, set it down again. "How far?" 2 months, maybe a little more." "Does Emmett know?" "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because his first wife left him. Because the war broke something in his head that might never fully heal. Because he punches walls in his sleep and shakes when he's awake. And the idea of being responsible for a child might what? Destroy him? Or save him?" Eliza pressed her hands to her stomach. "I don't know." "Then you better find out. Because that man deserves the truth. And you know it." She rode home with the truth sitting in her chest like a lit fuse. Emmett was on the porch when she got back. He'd returned early. Something about a fence break that turned out to be nothing. He was drinking coffee and watching the dogs chase something in the grass, and he looked, for once, peaceful.
"How's Louisa?" he asked. Opinionated as ever. "That's Louisa." He took her hand as she sat beside him. Casual now, natural. The kind of touch that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. "Good ride?" "Emmett." He heard it, the shift in her voice, the weight. He turned to face her, and she watched the peace drain from his expression like water through a crack. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you react." His hand tightened on hers. "All right?" "I'm pregnant." The word landed between them like a stone in still water. Emmett didn't move, didn't blink. His hand on hers went rigid, every muscle in his arm locking down. "Say that again?" "I'm pregnant, about 2 months. The baby would come in late March or early April." Silence. The kind that has texture. The kind you could drown in. Then Emmett pulled his hand away, stood, walked to the edge of the porch, put both hands on the railing, and gripped until his knuckles went white. "Emmett?" "Give me a minute." She gave him a minute, then 2, then 5. He stood at that railing with his back to her and his head bowed and his shoulders carrying a weight she couldn't see but could feel from 6 feet away. "When Clara and I talked about children," he said finally, "I told her I wasn't fit to be a father. She agreed, said she didn't want to raise a baby with a man who woke up screaming. Said any child of mine would grow up afraid of his own father." His voice was controlled, too controlled, like a dam holding back a flood. She was right. She was wrong. You don't know that. I do know that, because I've watched you with Charlie, who's basically a child in a man's body. I've watched you with Tommy Miller when you carried him to the boarding house during the fever. I've watched you with the dogs and the horses and every living thing on this ranch. And you are the gentlest man I've ever known. I put my fist through walls. In your sleep, not awake. Not at people. Never at people. What if I wake up and the baby's crying, and I don't know where I am, and I... His voice cracked. What if I hurt it? What if I hurt you? Eliza stood, walked to him, put her hand on his back, and felt the tremor running through him like a current. Then we'll plan for it. We'll put the baby's room far from ours. We'll have Hank close by on bad nights. We'll build safety around this child the way we've built everything else on this ranch. Carefully, honestly, together. He turned. His eyes were red. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping. "I'm terrified," he said. "Good. Terrified means you care. Terrified means you'll be careful. I'd be worried if you weren't scared. What if I'm like my father? He drank, beat my mother. I swore I'd never. You're not your father. The same way I'm not mine. We're not our parents, Emmett. We're what we choose to be. And you've chosen to be good every single day I've known you." He pulled her against him, held her so tight she felt his heartbeat through both their shirts. Hammering, wild. The heartbeat of a man who'd survived a war and a broken marriage and years of isolation, and was now being asked to survive something even harder. Hope. "A baby," he said into her hair. "Our baby. Our baby. God help me. God and me both." He laughed. Short, broken, wet. Then he pulled back, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her with everything he had. "I love you," he said. "I'm going to be terrible at this, and I'm going to try anyway." That's all anyone can do. Hank was the first to figure it out, or rather, the first to confirm what he'd already guessed. He found Eliza behind the barn the next morning, throwing up into a bucket. "Morning sickness," he said, not a question. "Don't tell Charlie."
Charlie'll figure it out when you stop fitting through doorways. Hank. Congratulations, Eliza. His voice was soft, genuine. Emmett know? I told him last night. How'd he take it? He cried. Then he reorganized the pantry. Then he cried again. Then he started building something in the barn and won't tell me what it is. Cradle. He's been hoarding wood for a month. I think he knew before you did. Charlie found out a week later when Eliza declined coffee at breakfast, and he connected the dots with surprising speed for a man who once put his boots on the wrong feet. You're having a baby, he announced. Fork suspended midair, eyes enormous. Boss, she's having a baby. I know, Charlie. A real baby, a tiny human person on this ranch, living here with us. That's generally how it works. I'm going to be an uncle. Charlie's face split into the widest grin Eliza had ever seen. Well, not really, but basically. Ma'am, can I be Uncle Charlie? I've always wanted to be an uncle. You can be Uncle Charlie. Hank, did you hear that? I'm Uncle Charlie. I heard, Charlie. The whole valley heard. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. The work continued. The ranch demanded its daily tribute of sweat and labor. Cattle needed moving. Fences needed mending. The garden needed tending. But underneath the routine, something had shifted. Emmett watched her differently now. Not with the careful distance of their first weeks, not even with the growing warmth of the months after. This was something more primal, protective in a way that made her want to kiss him and throttle him in equal measure. You shouldn't be lifting that. It's a bucket of eggs, Emmett. It's a heavy bucket. It weighs 4 pounds. I'll carry it. If you carry my egg bucket, I'm going to throw the eggs at you. He carried the bucket anyway. She didn't throw the eggs, but she wanted to. October brought the first real test. Tom Briggs filed a claim with the Territorial Land Office. Challenged Emmett's boundary survey on the north section, the piece of land that bordered the creek, the best water on the property. Without it, half the ranch's grazing land became useless in dry season. Hank brought the news from town, handed Emmett the official notice without a word. Emmett read it at the kitchen table while Eliza watched his face go from calm to stone. He's contesting the survey from 1868, Emmett said. Says the original markers were placed wrong. Says 60 acres of my north section actually belongs to the Territorial Trust, which just happens to be administered by the bank. His bank. Can he do that? He can file. Whether he wins is another thing. But the hearing's in Butte. I'd have to ride there, hire a lawyer, present my documents. Takes time, takes money, and while I'm gone. He knows the ranch is vulnerable. He's counting on it. Eliza took the notice from his hand, read it carefully. Every line, every legal phrase. Her father had been sued. She'd sat through depositions. She knew how lawyers thought. This is weak, she said. The original survey was filed with the Federal Land Office, not territorial. He's citing territorial jurisdiction over a federal claim. Any competent judge would throw it out. Emmett stared at her. How do you know that? My father was sued for malpractice. I spent 6 months reading legal documents. You learn things. She set the notice down. You don't need a lawyer, Emmett. You need your original filing papers and a copy of the Federal Survey Act, both of which should be in the land office in Butte. You're sure? I'm sure his claim is procedurally flawed. Whether the judge agrees depends on the judge. But the law is on your side. Emmett looked at her for a long time. Then he did something she didn't expect. He smiled, a real smile, slow and warm and full of something that looked like wonder. You're the best thing that ever happened to this ranch, he said, and I'm including the creek in that comparison. Flattering. I mean it, Eliza. I married you for honesty and partnership. I got a doctor, a lawyer, and the toughest woman in Montana Territory. You got a pregnant woman who can't keep breakfast down and yells at you about egg buckets. That too. He rode to Butte with Hank the next day, carrying the documents Eliza had organized. She'd spent the night going through every paper in Emmett's filing cabinet, a disaster of receipts and surveys and deeds stuffed into folders with no system. She'd sorted, organized, and flagged the critical documents with notes in her precise handwriting. If the judge asks about the 1868 survey, she told him at the door, show him page 4 of the federal filing. It references the original markers by GPS coordinates. Briggs's claim uses different coordinates. That's the discrepancy. That's where his case falls apart. GPS? Geographic Point Survey. It's a federal system. Briggs used the territorial system, which has different reference points. They're measuring from different starting locations. His 60 acres don't overlap with yours. They overlap with unclaimed land 2 miles east. Emmett shook his head. Eliza, you're terrifying. Remember that next time you try to carry my eggs. He was gone 4 days. Longest 4 days since she'd arrived. Eliza managed the ranch with Charlie and a temporary hand Hank had hired from town. She cooked, cleaned, tended the garden, checked the cattle, kept the books, and threw up every morning with a regularity that would have impressed a Swiss clockmaker. Charlie hovered like a nervous hen. Can I get you anything, ma'am? Water? Food? A chair? A blanket? Charlie, if you ask me one more time if I need anything, I'm going to need you to dig your own grave. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. It's just that the boss said to take care of you, and he's real specific about what happens to me if I don't. What happens to you? He didn't say exactly, but his face said it involved a long walk and a short cliff. On the 4th day, hoofbeats. Eliza was on the porch, mending a shirt, and she stood so fast the needle pricked her finger. Emmett and Hank rode into the yard, both dusty, both tired, and Emmett was grinning. She'd never seen him grin. Smile, yes. The ghost smile, the reluctant smile, the surprised by his own happiness smile. But a grin? Wide and unguarded and boyish? Never. Thrown out, he said, dismounting. Judge took one look at the filing discrepancy, called it frivolous, and threw it out, warned Briggs's lawyer that any further claims would result in sanctions. And Briggs? Sitting in a Butte courtroom with his mouth open and his lawyer sweating. Eliza's knees went weak with relief. She sat back down on the porch step and pressed her hand to her stomach. Emmett knelt in front of her. You did this. Your brain, your research. You saved 60 acres from a chair in our kitchen. The law saved it. I just read the paperwork. Same thing. He put his hand over hers on her belly. Our kid's going to be the smartest person in Montana. With your stubbornness and my temper, they're going to be impossible. Good. Impossible people change the world. Winter came hard and fast. First snow in November, deep drifts by December. The ranch hunkered down. Emmett and the hands worked shorter days, closer to home. Eliza grew larger and slower and more irritable, which she expressed through increasingly creative profanity that made Charlie blush and Hank pretend not to hear. I can't see my feet, she announced one morning in January, standing in the kitchen in her nightgown with her hands on her enormous belly. I can see them, Emmett offered from the table. They're still there. That's not helpful. Would it be helpful if I tied your boots? Would it be helpful if I threw these boots at your head? Probably not, but I'd understand. He tied her boots every morning after that, kneeling at her feet with his scarred hands and his trembling fingers, lacing them carefully, and she'd run her hand through his graying hair and feel the baby kick against her ribs and think, "This is love." Not the fairy tale kind, the real kind. The kind that kneels on a cold floor and ties your boots because you can't reach. In February, Louisa brought Doc Pruitt to the ranch.
Not the old Pruitt who'd prescribed laudanum and stormed out. A humbler Pruitt. One who'd watched Eliza save 6 patients during the fever and spent the month since quietly, grudgingly, accepting that she knew what she was doing. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, standing in her kitchen with his hat in his hands, "I owe you an apology." "You don't." "I do. I was proud and stubborn, and you were right. About the treatment, the water, all of it. Tommy Miller's alive because of you. I came to say thank you and to offer my help. With the baby, if you'll have me." Eliza looked at this old man, 73 and half blind, who'd swallowed his pride and ridden an hour in winter cold to say words that clearly tasted like ground glass in his mouth. "I'd be grateful for your help, Doctor. I'll come a week before your due date. Stay close. I've delivered more babies than I can count. I may not know everything, but I know that." "That's all I need." He stayed for coffee, told her about his wife, dead 10 years, who'd been the real doctor in the family. "She had hands like yours," he said, "sure and gentle. She would have liked you, Mrs. Calloway." After he left, Emmett stood in the doorway. "That's the same man who stormed out calling you a fraud." "People change, Emmett. Given the chance, most people change." "You believe that?" "I married you, didn't I?" The baby came on a March night, when the wind howled and the snow fell sideways, and Emmett paced the kitchen like a caged animal, while Doc Pruitt and Louisa attended Eliza upstairs. The labor was long. 12 hours of pain that came in waves, each one bigger than the last. Eliza gripped the headboard, gritted her teeth, and refused to scream, because Emmett was downstairs and every sound she made would break him. "Scream if you need to," Louisa said, wiping her forehead. "He can take it." "I can take it too." "I know you can, but you don't have to." At 3 in the morning, Eliza screamed. Once, raw and animal and involuntary. She heard Emmett's boots on the stairs, heard Louisa intercept him in the hallway, heard his voice cracked and desperate. "Is she? She's fine. She's working. Let her work. I need to see her. You need to let her do this. 2 more minutes, Emmett. Give her 2 more minutes." The baby was born at 3:17 a.m. A boy. Red-faced, furious, with lungs that filled the house with sound. Pruitt cut the cord. Louisa wrapped him in the blanket May Parker had quilted. Eliza held her son and felt the world remake itself around this single point of screaming, squirming, impossible life. "Let him in," she said. Emmett came through the... Emmett reached out one trembling hand and touched the baby's cheek. The baby turned toward his finger, instinct seeking warmth, seeking safety, seeking the parent he'd just met. "He's perfect," Emmett whispered. "He's loud." "He's perfect and loud." Emmett's face was wet. He didn't wipe it, didn't try to hide it, just sat there, crying and touching his son's face, and looking at Eliza like she'd handed him the whole world in a blanket. "What's his name?" Louisa asked from the doorway. Emmett looked at Eliza. She looked at him. They discussed names for months, argued, laughed, vetoed each other's terrible suggestions. "Thomas," Eliza said. "Thomas Henry Calloway." Emmett's breath caught. Thomas, for the friend he'd left at Shiloh. Henry, for the father Eliza had lost. 2 ghosts given new life in one small body. "Thomas," Emmett repeated, and the name came out like a prayer.
Pruitt checked the baby, checked Eliza, pronounced both healthy, and retired to the guest room with the satisfied air of a man who'd done his job and done it well. Louisa kissed Eliza's forehead, squeezed Emmett's shoulder, and disappeared downstairs to make coffee for the household that was about to discover what sleep deprivation really meant. Charlie and Hank met the baby at dawn. Charlie cried. Hank didn't, but his eyes were suspiciously bright when he held Thomas for the first time and said, "Welcome to the ranch, little man. You've got good people." That evening, after everyone had gone, after the house was quiet and Thomas was sleeping in the cradle Emmett had built from hoarded wood, Eliza sat in bed watching her husband watch their son. Emmett sat in a chair beside the cradle, just sat there, watching Thomas breathe. His hands rested on his knees, and for the first time since she'd known him, both of them were still. No tremor, no shake, just steady. "Emmett," he looked up. "The nightmares," she said.
Last night, you didn't have one.
He blinked, looked at his hands, looked at her. "No," he said slowly. "I didn't." "First time?" "Since before Shiloh. First time in 14 years. They sat with that, the weight and wonder of it. "Maybe the war's finally letting go," Eliza said. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just that the thing I was fighting for finally showed up." He looked back at the cradle. "I spent 14 years dreaming about the worst day of my life. Maybe now I've got something better to dream about." Eliza held out her hand. He took it, sat on the bed beside her. She leaned into his shoulder, and they watched their son sleep. And the silence between them was the kind that says everything. "I found the envelope," Eliza said. "Last week, in my drawer. The $200 and the return ticket." "I know. I put it there the day you arrived." "I want you to have it back." "It's yours, Eliza." "I know, and I'm giving it back, not because I don't want it, because I don't need it. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. You're my home. Thomas is my home. I don't need an escape route from the place I want to be." Emmett pressed his lips to her hair. She felt his breath shudder. "Use it for something good," she said. "Help someone the way you helped me. Pay for a widow's train ticket. Stake a homesteader. Give someone else the choice you gave me." The choice to marry a broken-down rancher with bad dreams? The choice to start over. That's what you gave me, Emmett. Not a husband. Not a house. A second chance. Give that to someone who needs it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "All right. I'll find someone." "Good." Thomas stirred, made a small sound that was half cry, half sigh. Emmett stood, lifted his son with hands that were gentle and sure, held him against his chest. The baby settled, found his father's heartbeat, and went still. "I used to think I survived the war by accident," Emmett said, swaying gently. And when morning came, pale gold through the curtains, Thomas cried his first hungry cry, and Emmett was up before Eliza could move, lifting their son, bringing him to her, sitting beside her while she nursed, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes on the child they'd made together. This was their life now, not the one either of them had planned, not the one they'd imagined or hoped for or thought they deserved. Better, harder, realer. A life built from the ruins of two broken ones, held together by honesty and work and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Outside, the ranch woke to spring. Hank fed the horses. Charlie burned the coffee. The dogs barked at nothing. And somewhere in Copper Bend, Luisa Reyes poured a drink for a stranger passing through and said, "You want a story? Let me tell you about the woman who came here with nothing and gave this town everything." Eliza Calloway didn't hear her.
She was home, in the house her husband built, with their son in her arms, watching the man she loved tie his boots with steady hands. Both of them steady now. Both of them finally, fully still. Because sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't surviving the storm, or fighting the fight, or standing up when the world wants you down. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone see you broken and trusting them not to walk away. Sometimes it's choosing a stranger and discovering they were the one person who was never strange at all. Eliza chose. Emmett chose. And in the choosing, they found what neither had dared believe existed. Not a perfect life. A real one. And that was enough. That was everything.